So I'm in a bit of a pickle. I'm leaving in less than 24 hours to California from New York to head to Rapid TCT, and I don't own any merch. I don't produce or sell any merch. However, I want to be rocking something that I can wear that's 3D printing centric, that maybe represents me and Uncle Jessy and the channel here and the things that I do. And I want to see if I can take a basic plain t-shirt and go from this to this. And yeah, this turned out so much better than I was anticipating. Now, there are a handful of different ways that you could approach 3D printing on garments, or 3D printing plus t-shirts to make your own designs. And probably the most popular option is one that I think Shori Designs started off with, which I did a video on a handful of years ago. And to do that, you start a print, then pause it partway through, then lay down a very thin piece of fabric and secure it in place, and then resume your print. And you can make these really cool extruded 3D objects directly secured into your fabric or directly onto a t-shirt even. And Zach Friedman over at Voidstar Labs even did a video recently where he was taking TPU and printing directly on a t-shirt to create a graphic tee that he ended up wearing to a conference. Now again, I have a very limited amount of time and I don't want to be experimenting with TPU directly on a t-shirt and seeing if it works or if I get the leveling correct. There's a lot of errors that could go wrong with that. So I figured I'd try a technique that I saw on one of the other social media platforms by OakNutWorkshop, which is creating a 3D printed stamp and then using that plus fabric ink to stamp directly into your t-shirts. That's a wildly cool idea. In my opinion, it should simplify things greatly. However, there is one major downside to this whole thing. Using any of these fabric inks typically take anywhere between 3 to 4 days to cure, or if you want them to more rapidly cure, you need a heat press, which I don't own, and I don't have enough time to wait for Amazon to deliver me one. So like any other sane person, we're gonna use spray paint for this project. This could go just horribly wrong. And obviously the major benefit to attempting this is that this should dry in like 20 minutes to an hour versus the 2 to 3 days that it would take for these fabric paints to air dry. But the first thing that we're gonna need is actually something to stamp. So you're gonna need a design or your logo or something in general that you'd be interested in trying to 3D print and then have transferred over to a t-shirt. So I'm obviously gonna be going for my logo that I have, and then I'm gonna be also looking at using some text that I've designed, that I've thought of, that might go well on a t-shirt that I might end up running as some merch. If you're interested in me actually creating some official merch, let me know in the comments. I've never done that before, but let me know. Maybe I'll make a run of these. Now, really, you could use any kind of design app or just images that you might find online. Your results may vary, but this is what I'm using. Is just, again, I have a JPEG of the artwork that I'd like to use, and there's a tool online that we're gonna convert this into an SVG file. And this is a completely free website for you to use. It's picsvg.com. You're gonna take your JPEG file and upload it, and then there are a few file options for you to play around with depending on the results that you're looking for. And again, you might need to tweak your images that you're working with, the artwork, to get the exact results that you're looking for. And then once you have it ready, you can hit download and you have your SVG file. Now, I'm gonna be taking this directly into Tinkercad where I can modify it further. And again, you can use any 3D modeling app you'd like for this. I'm trying to keep it with a free route, and the easiest way possible that I can think of is by using Tinkercad. So I'm uploading the SVG file there, and what you'll see is it automatically extruded that upwards. And what I'm gonna wanna do is now create a backing for it. So I'm just gonna take this rectangle and then place it on it and stretch it out to fill the entire space, and then offset it slightly from the object so that it's taking up the top half of it. And what we should have now is the inverted image that we're gonna want to print that I can now stamp. Keep in mind, you definitely want your images inverted before you print them so that they'll stamp correctly and look in the correct orientation once you have them stamped. One other thing that you're gonna need is an actual stamper, a little hand holding device there that you can attach to your 3D print to make the stamping process easier. Now again, I just created this in Tinkercad. I'll have that exact file available for you to freely download online. And then we can get to 3D printing our objects. And this is where I want to say a big thank you to Elegoo for sponsoring today's video. Not only are they sending me out to Rapid TCT to represent them at their booth and give some talks about their 3D printers, but Elegoo is also, at the time of the release of this video, video, the Amazon Prime Day sale should be going on, and Elegoo is gonna have some amazing deals on their 3D printers, filaments, as well as their resins. I don't have the specific details just yet of this as I'm recording it prior to the event. However, they promised me that there are some massive deals to be had. So if you're interested in a new 3D printer, some filament, or some resin, make sure you're checking out the Prime Day sales on July 16th and 17th. And thanks again to Elegoo for sponsoring today's video. And when it comes to actually printing your designs, you can print them at a really high layer height. So 0.28 or 0.32 should be absolutely fine. What you want to make sure you're doing in your slicer setting is enabling ironing for the very topmost layer. This is going to ensure that that top layer that you're going to be using as for the stamp is nice and smooth. And here you'll see we've got some of the prints that I'm going to be using for this project here. And there's a little bit of stringing that we've got on these that we're going to need to clean up before we can go through the process of actually stamping. And you can either use something like a heat gun, or in this case, I'm going to be using one of Hacksmith's lightsabers. Then we just need to secure the stamps to the little handles that we've printed. And for this, I'm gonna be using some 3D glue, which is gonna chemically weld the two objects together in a really short amount of time. Yeah, and when I mean short, I mean really short. Look at this, it's already welded together where we can use it. And the last thing that we need are t-shirts for us to actually stamp. One of my go-to spots for t-shirts is Target. They're really cheap. They're usually like $6 or $8 for a plain basic t-shirt. So I've gotten a whole bunch of different ones here in black and white for me to work with. One other thing that I almost forgot about is you're gonna need a mat of some kind that you can cut that can go inside the t-shirt so that when you're applying the stamp to it, it has something that you can apply a pressure to and not have the ink leak all the way through to the backside of the t-shirt. So cardboard, some kind of a board. I'm using this foam mat here from Harbor Freight that I'm gonna cut up to better fit inside the t-shirt. And unfortunately, as I was speeding through this to try and get it done, I forgot to plug in my microphone. So there's no audio, so I'm just gonna talk over all the video footage here. And my camera ended up dying partway through it, so thankfully I had my phone, so you'll see some vertical footage mixed in. But I wanted to make sure that you end up using the correct side of that foam mat. Like mine had a textured side. You definitely wanna make sure you're using the smooth side because it will impact the stamping process because you'll get the texture from that surface on the underside of your stamps. But all I did was take some spray paint and just spray on a coating so it was a nice wet coating on the actual stamp and then pressed it firmly into the t-shirt. You can also see where I had the t-shirt pinned down to try and reduce some of the peeling factor when I was pulling back up on the stamp. But I let it sit there for a few seconds and then pulled it away and it looked pretty decent. The spray paint definitely gives this vintage t-shirt look, so if that's something that you're into, which is something that I'm into, it's really nice factor with some of these prints here. And you'll definitely see where some parts are a lot more faded than others, where it might have had a little bit more ink on it than other areas, or maybe I just didn't apply as much pressure on those specific spots. Then once I was done stamping all of my t-shirts, I then very carefully put them on hangers and let them hang for about 30 minutes and then check to see how dry they were. Now I'm back from Rapid TCT and I ended up wearing these t-shirts during the show and had an absolute blast making them. And in fact, since I've been back, I've even washed them and happy to say that they've held up through the washing machine cycle and not, you know, chipped away or faded. As far as I can tell, they're definitely already given that little vintage look with the spray paint application, but so happy with how these look from that effect of spray painting on. Definitely the red on white looks so much better than the white spray paint on the black t-shirt. The white on black definitely gives it a faded look. The white really did not pop as much as I'd like it to have. Also on the back side, you'll see where I was talking about stamping it and making sure that you had the foam padding on the smooth side. Probably cardboard is a better option for stamping than the actual mat that I used, but you definitely want something large and flat because you can see the little individual textured spikes from the underside of that foam mat that's bleeding through to the stamps. Also on one of the black t-shirts, I attempted to re-stamp it after letting it sit for a few minutes just to have that white pop a little bit more. It definitely does, but it's really hard to realign those stamps without having some sort of a faded offset. But the white on red looks so good. Also, these are just basic 3D printed with PLA prints, nothing special about them. And in fact, I even tried printing with some, not TPU, but it's that flexible PLA filament that Atarax Maxia has. And I would say this didn't even work as well as the PLA did because it's got a little bit of like a rubberized texture to it. And I feel like that was really coming through on some of the practice stamps that I did with this larger logo. And speaking of, yeah, you can definitely go at it here and really practice on an older t-shirt with some of the stamps. Here you can see I was trying with that rubberized stamp there, applying a lot more of the white paint to it to see if it would come through, and it definitely did, where I had a much wetter finish, but it's also really thicker and much more texturized that you can feel versus the, you know, printed look of the red ones here. But this was such a fun project that I 100% recommend that you try out and try printing some of your unique designs and then stamping them directly onto your t-shirts. The spray paint method worked extremely well for me as well. I'm gonna be following up and testing out using some actual inks that are properly used for t-shirts and stamping them in, and using this heat press that I just got off of Facebook Marketplace for 40 bucks. I don't even know if this thing works. It heats up, I think. It's definitely seen better days, but it's way better 40 bucks over like $240. If you have any ideas or tips or suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. I had way too much fun with this project, and I'm in the middle of printing a really unique, fun design that I'm gonna be stamping overnight here before I get this video posted first thing in the morning. I want to say thanks so much for watching. Again, let me know what you think about this video. If you are a Patreon member, I wanted to say thank you so much for your continued support. If you're interested in things like the 3D printer settings that I used for the prints in today's video, you'll find those over in my Patreon. But hey, thanks again for watching, you all, and let me know if you end up making your own 3D printed t-shirts. Tag me online because I would love to see them. Hey, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.